This is the last video to make the marriage rug. I'll just review a few things. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your colors are in stacks and you blanket stitch them. Be mindful of the thread. The thread is long, so measure your first thread and then cut. You'll probably have about that much left over from one strand of thread, so you don't want to waste it into small pieces. Those are good for the stars. This can be the marriage rug, but it can also be a memory rug. If you don't want it to be a marriage rug, you would put your name here, and you would put important people and things, events that have happened in your life. The second part, which we did in the layout video, was to, after your tongues are blanket stitched, and I have 92 in this rug, but I've given you 100 of the tongues, so you may need extras as you go around those curves. So I wanted to make sure you had quite a few extra, but don't worry that you need to use all of the 100. You then take your paper template, your tissue paper template. You find the center of your lining material. You pin it, put your template together, pin it, and transfer the lines for the tongues. And we did that in the last video. And then we'll start working on our plaid tongue rug to complete the stitching. So the first row of your tongues you should place on your stitching line, on your line from your template, your tissue template, and those should be stitched to your base. That is your first set of tongues, and they need to be quite secure. The row 2 and row 3 in the rug, they do not need to be stitched, but they need to be pinned securely. And what you are doing is you are making sure that, as I've mentioned in the layout video, that you have your tongues going off center, and be mindful of the V. It should be quite uniform all through the rug. You may need extras as you turn the corners. Sometimes if your tongues are off, it means you need to have one extra on those curves, or sometimes it means you need one less. You just need to go by eye on that. That's really the most difficult part of this rug, is getting those tongues so that they work. And you can, my pins, once you have your first row of tongues that they look good, then you place the next ones on your line. And if you do not want to stitch row by row, make sure that you have secured your tongues with 2 pins so they don't move, because they do tend to move. You need to pin it down here and then up further, but do not pin it so that you can not see your line for your next row of tongues. So once you have that completed and it looks good, then you would stitch those 2 rows. Just a regular small stitch using regular thread, just regular sewing thread. You would go through and you would stitch them to the base. Then if you are doing the marriage rug, it's time to do your lettering. And you would do that by just lifting your rug tongue up and doing your transfer. Oh, I'm out of camera. Lifting your tongue up, doing your transfer, and then doing the embroidery. It depends on how you would like to lay your rug out. I've put my grandmother's date of birth and the date she died, and my grandfather's. I put my aunts and uncles on this side. I put my family on one side, but you can just put them wherever you think they would look good, and with families. And once that is completed, and I do want to go over again about the thread that I've used in the kit. I have used the string to do my embroidery, but I found it very difficult to do. And I took it apart. I used a small length, and I took it apart the same as you would embroidery floss. It's difficult to do. And you see it does not work the same as embroidery floss. It's not as strong, and it does wrinkle. So I've used one strand, which would be probably equivalent to one strand of embroidery floss, perhaps, I think perhaps 2 strands of embroidery floss. But it's very brittle. And I ended up that I could not find a way to make it stronger. I would be stitching and it would break. So I used a glue stick and I put it on the thread, let the glue dry, and then I stitched with it. But embroidery floss would be just as good. And find embroidery floss, find a color that would be very close to your thread in your kit and not as dark as your tongues. Do not go lighter. That would be way too light. This one would be fine. It's not the same color, but it will go very nicely with the rug. If in doubt, go one shade darker. And I would suggest the floss. The thread was terrible to work with. And so once you have those done, and I will mention, if you are doing the rug in the future, you would like to add to your... So once you have your tongues embroidered and secured to your base fabric, the next thing you do is secure them with the stars. I'm not sure of the name of the star. It's an Algerian something, I think it is, but the way I make it, I make a template. And let's see if... there. And I put numbers on the template for my stitches. And this is the regular tongue in your rug, not the ones in the center, the regular ones. And it's a three-quarter inch square, and I put it on the diagonal, and then I make the numbers for my stitching. This will secure your tongue. You still have these flaps that are open. They will need to be stay stitched, but this is what secures one tongue to the other. And so I I have my board on an angle here. I'm not sure how that's going to work to show you in the video. So I used my regular thread that you did the tongues. I lift it up. I have a knot in the thread. And I bring it out to number 1. Make sure it's nice and even. Then my needle goes in to number 2. I catch the wool but not the base, hopefully. I bring it out to number 3. Bring it over to number 4, and I put my needle in not this way, put it in straight to catch. Bring it up to number 5. Not too tight. Sometimes they're off, and I really can't do a perfect one. Bring it down to number 6. Catch the wool. Bring it up to number 7. And you can do these quite quickly. I'm doing this on an angle, and I'm doing it slow so you can see the process. Oh, and of course it catches on both of them. Oh gosh. I need to go down to number 8. This one's in a little too far, I know that. But however, they're not perfect. When I go into number 8, I come up only to the center. I'm not sure if I can get a closer view than that. Only to the center. Pull it out. And that's my star, but now I have to stay it. So this one's way off. It's difficult to do on an angle. Just pull your thread loose. So between number 2 and number 8, I go very close to the stitching, put my needle in, and then I bring it out. That makes a little lock. And when I'm back here, I stay the stitching. Just a couple. And try not to catch your base when you're doing this. Just your tongues and the wool. And then I cut. And that's my star. It's a little off, but as I always say, primitive and perfect do not go together. And that's how you do the stars. On the marriage rug, you will have large stars and small stars. I will show you that in a minute. I wanted to show you your last row, your very last row that you're doing. Do not catch the base. You do not want your stitching to go through on the base because you have nothing underneath. You have no more wool tongues, so you need to just put your base back so that you just have your wool that you're doing your star on. And you would continue doing that until you've finished all the stars in your rug. with the marriage rug, you have a small star at the top of every embroidered tongue, just a small star, and that is the same. That's secured only to the tongues above it. So once that is finished, then we will need to stay stitch all of these so they don't flop around and you don't see your base, and that will be in the next segment. So the next thing we do, once your embroidery is finished, your stars are in place, your tongues are secure to one another, the next thing we do is stop the flaps from moving. And I like to pin them in place first to make sure they're nice and straight. So I would just put a pin in. And then at the very tip, those need to be stay stitched. So I'm just using ordinary thread. Of course I have a long tail there. Make sure they're nice and neat. And if you're doing the marriage rug at a later date, you can just remove the stitching and embroider one of the tongues. But keep in mind, if you are adding to a marriage rug, you will need to also take out your star, which you will need to do anyway if you're doing the bottom, anything but the top. You'll need to replace your star with a small one. So make sure that you keep your threads, and as I said, if you are aging your rug, make sure you age those threads along with it. So it's just a very few stitches. And with this thread, you can go through and tack the base of your rug, the cotton, and then just a couple back stitches to secure. It's really a lot of work in these rugs. It's not really necessary to go through and do that. It's I have done that. I have tacked all through, but it's not really necessary if you have enough overlap. And you would go through and you would do all 92, 96, 100 of those. A lot of work. And the next thing we will do is we will do the center, and I will show you how to do that in the next segment. So we have the embroidery, we have the stars, the large and the small. Don't be concerned that they are perfect. Mine are, I don't think I would find one perfect star in my whole rug. And that goes with the look of the embroidery. I have I have a chart of embroidery done, that if you would like to have the old looking letters, can't seem to find it right now. I will show that later. If you'd like to do them yourself, that's fine. I used, I left the first two numbers off, so it would have been born in 1911. My uncle would have been born in 1911, and he would have died in 1953. You can do those any way you would like. Now it's time to do the center. You have everything stitched and down, all of your embroidery done. I did the center with the regular string because I wanted it a heavier look to the stitching. If you are using the embroidery floss, I would use the floss to do this rather than the string, and I would use probably double. You can just test it. Probably double or even the 6-strand embroidery floss, probably, for that. And I do want to say that in some of your templates there are stars in the corner. You really don't need to do those if you don't want to. You can add to it. You can change the lettering. It's your rug. You can do whatever you like. So you just do your embroidery, and then you place the rectangle on the rug evenly, both sides. Then I stitched it down. This is a bit different than you would do with the tongue, if you have your tongue rug with the 3 on each side and 1 in the middle. With the rectangular piece, I just pinned it and stitched it. And I stitched a V-type blanket stitch instead of the regular. And that's very simple to do. Let me get everything out of the way here. It's just instead of, let's see now, instead of putting your needle in straight, you would put it in on a V. The first part is a V. Pull the thread over, and you insert your needle in the same hole as your first stitch and bring it out as it's so difficult to do videos as a V. Very simple. You can do a blanket stitch there, or actually any stitch that you would like to do. If you are doing embroidery for this part with the DMC floss, use the regular, whatever you used for your tongues, the thread. You would use the string thread to put it on the rug, so that all the lettering is floss, but all of the regular stitching is with the string thread. And if you have a rug that you are not doing the marriage part and you have your centers, then I will show you how to do that in the next segment with the plaid rug. If you are doing the just the regular rug with your stars in every tongue, and you have your 7 pieces for the center, I would do those first before I stitch them to the rug. It's much easier. Easier to do the stars, and you really don't, just as with the last row, you don't want your stars to be shown on the back of your base or your lining fabric. So I would do everything. I would do the blanket stitching, and I would do the stars. Make sure your stars are close to the top rather than down here. I would suggest you do the blanket stitching. You would lay it out I will just lay this one out and try to get them even. And then your center. And perhaps make a little mark or judge where your stars would be. They definitely are not down close as away from the top of the tongue like this one. So on this one you see, so you would bring it up. This one looks quite good. I would just bring it up a bit more. These are 3 stars evenly spaced. And you can do that before you add them to your rug. Once you do have your 7 tongues blanket stitched and the stars stitched, then you would put them on and place them evenly. Then you would use your thread, regular sewing thread, the same as you did with these, and you would stitch them down. You do not need to, let's see if I can show you. It's difficult. I should have these done to show you, but I didn't. You do not need to stitch this one down. You need to stitch. Make sure these are all secure. But these they do not need to be stitched completely around. You can just have a bit of a flap, but you do not want to see your star. You do not want it to come up like this so you can see the back of your star. So you just need to do them a little bit. This one you would need to do around. This one you would need to do around. But these two, you can do it around, but you don't need to, because these are not done around, and you want that look on these. And even this one you can have that look, but be very careful that it's not too far that you see your stitching. And that is almost the rug completed. The only step that we have left to do is to trim and to do the lining or the base cotton, and I will show you that in the next segment. The last step in doing the tongue rugs is to mark your base fabric, and you will need to mark it just where those tongues meet. And you can do that with whatever you choose to mark with. I would just go along and mark it with a pencil or something. Then you would, well, perhaps I could mark it. Then you would turn it over and connect, and you would cut about a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, because you need to fold down. You're folding in towards this part of the rug, and it's just a matter of folding under and then just doing some very nice and neat stitches and catch your rug. You can do a little bit down beyond the points, or you can do right to the points. Just don't have your lining showing out in between your rug, your tongues. And that is the end of the process to do a tongue rug. I then I really didn't age the marriage rug. I just used the water and my hands method and pressed it, and that does make a difference, and that's in the other video. This is, I don't know if you can, there, that's good. This is the template for the lettering, And if you would like a copy of that, you will need to contact me and let me know. And I can either send it to you